developer from Cleveland. It was very nice coming down here through the country this morning. And I've worked for 15 years in IT in various server client development environments. I don't work on a performance team. I've sometimes been in control of performance considerations when I've had total ownership of sites, but often not. I have always, though, in my perspective, I've always, though, had performance responsibilities. And so we're always, as devs, accountable for performance considerations. But today's talk is about considerations now in the dawn of responsive sites, in the dawn of mobile, and in our continuous delivery environments. So I'm just curious, how many of you are performance folks? Any performance folks in the room? No? No? I see no hands. OK. Any, then how many of you are developers on continuous integration teams, agile teams? OK, client-server developers, the most part. OK, any UX designers in the room? Cool. Few? All right. Great. So I'm going to use the term web page loosely in my presentation. And, but this, what I'm talking about is hopefully going to cover websites, mobile, and you know, cross-platform areas that we all work in. And as Eric Miner preached at us last week in Fluent, he just uses the term web, so I might do that too. I kind of like that, to think of it that way. I'm going to ask that we have a short amount of time this morning. We're just waking up, and I'm going to run through this presentation. I'm going to ask that we don't take questions during the presentation. We'll get through material. If there's time at the end, we'll do it. Otherwise, contact me here. I'm online. You can find me there. All right, so our agenda today is why we should care about these things, to give background, what is slow in terms of performance, it's all relative, top performant refactors, and tools to take away. So this is a hit list. What I want to emphasize that while this is titled bulletproof, there are no silver bullets in performance. And maybe your performance folks you know, can guide you on your teams, but really, there are no silver bullets. Business decisions are made around performance all the time. Sometimes we're in charge of those, sometimes not. Sometimes we can influence them, sometimes not. So this is really about you know, things that can be done, considerations that can be made. So this is a typical waterfall chart for performance. And back in 2012, Steve Sodders presented a call to action where he said that 80 to 90% of end users' response time is in the front end. Start there. So basically what he's talking about is that, you know, the weight of the page, the HTTP requests, 80 to 90% of them are on that front end. But I like, there's a guy, O'Reilly author Kyle Simpson, who talks about when we think front end, it's not just the CSS and HTML. There's actually a front end, a middle end, and this is going to give me front end, a middle end, and a back end. So the performance considerations, you know, that are made, you've got the front end presentation layer, but you have this middle end caching, you have the URL routing, you have the headers, you have the data contract, and then you have the back end server code sessions database. So we're not really going to get into the back end considerations for the reason that Steve Sodders is arguing here, but also because that's probably most of us in the room, maybe that's not where we are. And also, we may not have control of a lot of the middle end. You know, you might have a performance team or an architecture team that is taking care of adding gzip, you know, to your application, adding expires headers, you know, to your assets, running grunt tests, maybe some on the design end, running grunt tests to see what needs to be pre-rendered. So these are kind of business decisions that might be a little bit out of our control. And again, you know, there's no silver bullets here. Often it's business considerations, and sometimes that's, you know, not part of our day job. But, so why should we care? Still asking this question. We care because there is money, people care, businesses care, because there's money to be made with better performance. Google and Yahoo did big studies and found that there's a correlation between performance and revenue, that in the tens of millions of dollars if they can focus on some of these improvements. Smaller companies also have generated at least 5% revenue in this area. So, you know, there are quantitative research to back this, so that's one reason we could care. But it's not black and white. It's not, there's not a silver bullet. Luke Robrowski told a story last year about when his team released a poller app, that they were optimizing their polling function in the app, and they had improved it for performance. At the same time, they introduced a new UI item for animations, a spinner, in their loading. And they rolled them both out, you know, at the same time. And the feedback came in immediately that that the spinner gave a perception that the site was slower and unusable. So they had to go back and immediately take that off and re-push the polls in their new performance module. So, you know, you don't know how this is gonna, I'm sure they might have done some user testing, but you know, they went ahead and released it, and that's the feedback that they got. So it is this continuous reevaluation of performance, and it's not as black and white as we think. So what is slow? Kyle Pete says, it's not about how fast your site is, it's about how fast your users think it is. And I like that. It's page speed plus smooth perceived performance, which equals good UX. So, you know, in our jobs, again, we may be on different spectrums of how we can impact this. Delivering your web page as soon as possible and ensuring that the user interacts smoothly with it are key factors to good experience, but it's the perceived performance plus the actual performance. Do animations render smoothly? Do buttons respond immediately? Do you need event listeners? You know, the actual performance is about the response to the user interactions and how it performs as they make those actions. So here's a tool, web page test. Who's using this? Just a few, okay. It's a great tool, and you know, maybe folks on your performance teams are using it more, but you can certainly use it. Web page test actually aims to quantify the UX, meaning the page speed plus that perceived performance. And this, I'm going to be showing you a little site here. This is a little responsive site. It's got some pretty heavy images. And, but it's a pretty straightforward site. It has some image source sets, you know, for the responsive images, and I'm not going to mess with it too much because the video connection, but basically this site, having run it through web page test, I'm getting a start render time of 0.9995 seconds with the repeat view about half that. It's not bad. We're going to look at some of those timings in a second here to compare. But it's also giving this video capture to actually anticipate, you know, what a user is doing during these seconds of waiting for the page, what they're getting at what point. And so that's where that perceived performance indicators come in. You know, how much time are they idling before something is happening on the screen? So here, you know, we have a site loading about 2 seconds. And again, this is a responsive site, and as a rule of thumb, responsive sites do tend to add about 10% bloat to performance because of all those heavy images and style sheets and JS that are needed to make it responsive. There's another little tool. Let me get to that. You can add it as a plugin to your site called YSlow. And that's actually coming up over here. That's annoying. I gotta run this on my site for a second. I'll run it over here. YSlow is a plugin that you can run on your site to give you some performance results, to give you some data around the speed, around some of the improvements that can be made. All these algorithms are best practices of what you can actually go in and fix. And the thing is that, you know, maybe we have some control of this. Right now, this site is getting a grade of C. And it's telling me right here what needs to be fixed. And I haven't spent a whole lot of time on this site yet. It's not something I'm using for traffic, so you got to kind of weigh how much time you're going to put in. But it's saying that, you know, first of all, combine your JavaScript files, combine your style sheets. I'm getting an F in use a CDN. Your companies may have CDNs. If not, you know, you can tie into some of the larger ones. Use a CDN. It's got add expire headers. It's got, it's saying use gzip. So these are things that can be added to your site, and maybe that's your job to do it, maybe it's not. Put JavaScript at the bottom. That's easy enough. What else do we have? But it's also telling me, you know, you're getting A's for various things. So this, I can't get to the scroll, so I'm going to bring it back. Let's see what else is telling us. Minify the JS. And then also this has a statistics tab, which will give you the page weight itself, and it'll, you know, give you the content for the site. So it's a pretty handy little tool, and certainly you can spend a good amount of time trying to get your site as fast as possible. So we're still kind of at this question of what is slow. And Jacoby Nielsen in 1993 did research to tell us what is slow. And that research is still valid today. He basically said, he essentially created a critical path for the user experience. And he said that 100 milliseconds means instantaneous response where it feels immediate. 1,000 milliseconds keeps users' flow of thought seamlessly and feels natural. By the time you get to 10 seconds, you've completely lost the user. So those kind of statistics are a nice benchmark. Last week at Fluent, Paul Irish talked about what the Chrome team is doing with an initiative they call Rail. And it's got some figures in here for response to input, meaning the tap icon or the button or the drag finger. Animations and scroll. The user sees the animation and he scrolls the page. Idle, meaning the user isn't active but could be. And load, page load. It feels ready to use, the user sees the critical path. So they're working on this. So I showed you that Why Slow plugin. I highly recommend that you do this. But we're still at this question of why slow, or slow means essentially too many HTTP requests plus this perceived slowness. Our job in a continuous delivery environment is to handle those HTTP requests where we can. And it's not all on the performance side, and it's not necessarily on the design image asset side. So I'm going to just give you my top 10 list of things to think about. And these are things that I've collected over the years, and they are on the different sides of the perceived performance plus the speed. Let's start thinking about touch states. Hopefully this is happening in your code, but maybe not yet, just depending. Adding touch states to your code is perfectly acceptable. iOS and Android need simple events to the page with JavaScript and CSS to add those, but we can do this. This gives the feeling like they respond faster, and even though they actually respond at the same time. So getting our buttons and things like that touch ready. Use the momentum scrolling. So web pages on iOS have momentum scrolling, but you know, in other parts of our applications and other things that we're developing for, you're going to have to add it in. So add properties to the scrolling containers and make sure that's in place. Start to reclaim memory in JavaScript. The garbage collector is there at runtime to do its job, but let's not give it more work than it needs to. Don't hold on to objects any longer than you need to. Avoid unnecessary variables. So, you know, just simple refactoring is going to optimize your code. Along the same lines, refactor, you know, your functions or use closures to avoid empty access to objects. Get rid of what's not in scope. You know, make considerations about like this to optimize your code. Make this a part of your code reviews or your, you know, continuous delivery checks. Question the use of jQuery. jQuery is awesome, but you know, sometimes JavaScript is going to get the job done. And this is a sample table generation, and the event delegation here is more performant than binding to each table cell individually. So, you know, question the jQuery use on your sites. Use get. Use get in your AJAX calls. Get is meant for retrieval in the HTTP spec. So it only takes one TCP packet to send versus post, which does, you know, and so use get for retrieval. Question your JSON calls. Deduplicate data in your calls. There's been studies that say it's possible to get 60 to 70% reduction by restructuring your data calls, removing, you know, repeat code when possible. It's not just a data dump. Use, and so we're getting down to 3, so this is the top 10 list. And as we go down, you're going to get more bigger bang for your buck in terms of performance refactors as we go. The external JS and CSS versus inline. I mean, you know, I don't usually think inline with a lot of the work that I've done over the years, but sometimes business has to make some considerations for this. Yahoo did studies on their homepage and found that 40%, if not more, of their users are coming with empty cache. And so they had to load some of that, make some decisions around some of their content that they were loading for, you know, those that didn't have it cache. And it's very, you know, perplexing, but that happens. But that was their business decision. So utilizing some asynchronous code to utilize external JS and CSS will get you farther. Here we go, number 2, image asset control. And this is kind of the Wild West. You know, you may not have much, most of the people in this room probably don't work on this as much as the designers maybe, but you know, there are a lot of new formats coming, and these are to be explored, right? And the WebP format on Chrome right now, or you know, seeing what you can do with SVG, spriting, and things like this. These will greatly reduce your performance. And it's hard with responsive because you're serving multitudes of images at the same time. At that point, you can actually explore the picture tag in HTML and see about utilizing that for large format, like I could have done with this movie screen here. So there's a lot that can be done with images. This could be on the you know, a lot of these decisions are on the architecture side. You know, you can preload important images, add the expires headers to reduce the HTTP requests. There's a lot that can be done, but I think that the takeaway here is that, you know, you kind of have to question, you have to continually question what we're doing with our images and see if there's ways to optimize it. And I put this avoid empty image tags because I've done a lot of work on CMS systems, and it boggles me, some of the upload tools and things like that, that you still get the empty source tags and things like that. you know, they get in your code and it's highly annoying. But you want to clean those up as much as possible. Number 1, minification and concatenation. So at the end of the day, your biggest bang for the buck is using the minifier tools or concatenating your files if you can. So on our end, you actually may be in the position where you actually need to read the code. And so here are a few tools that you can to unminify these files. But if you do need to minify your CSS and your JS, here are a few tools, or concatenation tools as well. This guy, Robert Nyman, back in 2010, compiled a really great list of tools for concatenation and minifying in various languages, so you can do a Google search on that. All right, so let's look back at our site. This has, some of these optimizations that I was talking about. You could spend all day, kind of going for this. You really have to get to the point where you're making business decisions at why you're doing something. But here, just addressing some of these, I got 1 grade better, so a grade of B. And minifying some of the external sheets and doing some improvements on the images, it'll get you farther. I think if I was making money on this side, I would spend more time getting high traffic. If I can try to run this now through web page test. It's going to load. It's pretty quick sometimes because it's crunching through the entire site. Crunching through those large format images. And here we get some results. So I gained a little bit, the start render down there. Maybe I can use this. You're not going to see much on that screen, the white screen. But the start render's down to 0.83. The second review is much quicker. The video capture, it's giving me it gives you the waterfall mark, and then there's a video capture button in there that shows you that perceived performance, and I have it right here. So I gained about a half a second just by, doing some simple optimizations, and that adds up. And again, just utilizing that start render portion. There's a lot here, right? There's a lot of data here. There's a lot of customization that can be done with these tools. Utilizing that, the point here was just to kind of get you started. So tools to take away, start using these tools. This deck will be up on the Git repository, so download it, start using these tools, use the plugins. See how you can influence your performance teams to add some tools for, prefetching and gzipping and things like this to your workflow. I just want to give a plug here for an opportunity for those that are in the Cleveland area. Come on up to Lean Dog May 9th and 13th. We have parent-daughter hack days that you can come with your kids, and I'm involved with that. It's ages 9 and up. You're welcome to come and hang out with some other techies and bring your daughters or kids that you know to get them started in this stuff. And that's it. Contact me. These sites will be up on the repository. Contact me when, if you have further questions. I'd be happy to answer them. And let me know if there's anything else. Okay? Thank you. Just come up. I think that's the way we're going to do it.
If you guys have any questions, feel free to come up to the front and ask Rachel in person.